Delighted to welcome in from our friends at Bernstein Shur Group, one of the co-chairs of the law firm's labor and employment practice. Talesha Saint-Marc joins us on the GMI studios this morning. Talesha, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Jack. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, because this is an important segment. We have a lot of business owners who are listeners, small, medium, and larger business people, and they're the real thing that makes this everything work. As we know, your firm, you know that, your business. And let's talk about the status of some of that, the OSHA emergency temporary standards. We heard OSHA was going to be, giving fines if a private employer didn't do the federal mandates, and yet the Supreme Court said no to that. But how employers must be very confused, right?
Yeah, Jack, the last 2 years have just been such a roller coaster for employers, up and down with different government mandates. And so the most recent one was the OSHA ETS, which is the Emergency Temporary Standards. And what that would have required is any employer with 100 or more employees would have been required to either mandate vaccines, or for people who weren't vaccinated, they'd need to conduct weekly testing for those employees. As you mentioned, that the U.S. Supreme Court struck down that OSHA ETS, on January 26th, OSHA withdrew the proposed rule, but OSHA said, listen, we're not going to get rid of it completely. We're going to turn this into a proposed rule, which now must go through the regular process of rulemaking. So the OSHA ETS guidelines are not completely away. They're not completely out of the distance for employers. They may resurface at some point, but my guess is that we probably won't get any proposed rules passed on that. But where does that leave employers now? Really, employers, they don't have to follow these mandates. If they're thinking of instituting a vaccination policy, though, they definitely can do that on their own. But what I would really encourage employers to do is, before they do that, reach out to legal counsel. Let's have a conversation to make sure you don't run into any legal problems.
Now, Talesha, when you deal with clients, businesses, do you just get a phone call once in a while from an HR person, a COO, CEO, saying, "Hey, just a quick question. This is what we're thinking of doing. We're going to update our practices. We're going to do this. We have X% of our employees back in the building, X% working remotely. Some are kind of in a combination. Are we okay?" Is it good to make that call because they don't want to assume that they're not going to face a fine or a wrinkle down the road?
Absolutely. I think it's important to talk with legal counsel before you bring people back to work, because even without the mandates, there are some basic things you want to think about. For example, you want to make sure you're bringing your employees back in a safe manner. Think about whether you're going to implement any kind of mask mandates or temperature checks. Do you have enough room for people to socially distance? Are there cleaning protocols you might want to think about? But beyond just the safety issues, you want to think about a lot of your employees have been out of the workforce or out of your building for almost 2 years, if not a little bit shorter than that. And so is there any kind of training that you need to do? Do you need to do some employee engagement, find ways to re-engage people with each other and with your company values? There's a lot of things I think you have to think about before you just bring people back into the workplace.
Talesha with Bernstein Shur Group, talking about some of the COVID employer legal stuff, really, is how we can put this under the umbrella. Before I ask you about some well-being stuff with employees, just so we're clear, in New Hampshire right now, because actually a 100 employee person firm in some states may seem small, but in New Hampshire, I think most of our businesses are under 100 employees. We're home to a couple of larger, employers, whether it be Fidelity, BAE Systems, for example, but we're not Dartmouth Hitchcock up in Hanover. We don't, most businesses might be 65 to 70 employees. If they've been sailing the last 2 years in a very healthy setting, in other words, they have their HR policies, they're communicating with employees, they're keeping in touch with employees, they're offering whatever resources that pertains to COVID or other things, because I want to come back to mental health stuff for employee well-being. But if they're doing all the things that they're dotting the I's, crossing the T's, if someone does test positive and get sick, that the person should be out of the workplace, away from people for the recommended period of time, suggesting things but leaving it up in individuals, because the state of New Hampshire does not have a vaccine mandate for state employees, unlike some other states where you've seen the contentiousness there. So if they're doing all these things right, and they're a 70 employee person firm, are there any federal mandates that could come back to bite them?
Right now, no. There are no federal mandates that are in place for requiring employers to vaccinate their employees. So right now, the answer to that is no. But again, you just want to keep your eyes open because, in the last month or so, we've been through a little bit of whiplash with these mandates.
Yeah.
So I would, keep looking at the news and talk to your employment counsel if you have them, just to make sure that you stay up to date.
What about some of the things that are not so tangible as an employer? Because employers today have to be everything to everyone, and I'm talking about employee well-being. A lot of the mental health stuff I've been acutely concerned about because you've seen parents go through a lot of stresses at home with the ups and downs of the uncertainty of whether or not a school or a teacher is going to be there, or do they have to plan at the last minute to, the kid's going to study or remote learn. We've seen disruption in the homes. We've seen anxiety over things, confusion over things. Is this an area that employers should be more cognizant of to say, look, we want to know how you're doing emotionally as well. You can talk to so-and-so. We have some resources. Or do you think that's something that, is not the employer's, maybe not the word responsibility, but maybe, a part of a wellness concern for your employees?
Jack, I think New Hampshire employers are incredibly generous, and one of the things that I've noticed among my clients is that they've been incredibly generous to their employees during this pandemic. They've realized that employees and their families are under immense strain and stress, and so what we've been working on is looking how to reassess employee benefits through the lens of mental health issues. A lot of folks are dealing with depression, anxiety. We've heard the word long-term COVID symptoms coming up, foggy brain, and employers are trying to grapple with how do they maintain a productive and profitable business, but also still support their employees. So absolutely, while some employers may not think it's a responsibility, I think the ones that do well with their workforce realize that there is a little bit of responsibility there, and they try to make a difference for their employees.
Now, you work with a lot of different businesses, large, medium, small. Do you think we're still in this this sea of kind of like see what next week brings, see what 2 weeks brings, or do you think most businesses have adjusted and will be this way for months to come?
I think for the most part, a lot of businesses have adjusted, particularly now that we're not looking at any of the federal mandates and trying to figure out how they will play. We pretty much know how things are going in New Hampshire. Our governor's been pretty clear that he's not going to support any vaccine mandates or even a mask mandate. So I think most people in New Hampshire have started to settle out and realize that we may be in this for the long haul. Their employees have started to settle back in, either coming back to work or settled into remote work. And so I think that a lot of our employers are really resilient in New Hampshire, and they've done a great job of adjusting to these difficult conditions.
Talesha, before we let you go, Talesha Saint-Marc with Bernstein Shur Group on the employer side with all the COVID confusion, if you will. I've heard indirectly for some people, and they've asked me, and I don't know the answer to this, and I think you'd be a great expert to ask, and that is the Family Medical Leave Act. I've heard that certain employees, if they have some issues, for example, on the emotional side, anxiety, stress, that they can kind of make a claim there and be out for a period of time and be paid. Is that a responsibility employers have to take seriously, or is that something that is sort of the talk of social media?
It is absolutely something that some employers need to take seriously. If the employee is covered by the Family and Medical Leave Act or the FMLA, they may be entitled to leave as a accommodation or leave because of their serious medical condition. But this is not paid leave, Jack. The Family Medical Leave Act doesn't provide paid leave, which has been something that's talked about both nationally and the state level. So employees should be thinking about it. You should be talking to legal counsel. Reach out to us. Let us know what situations you're dealing with on a daily basis. We at Bernstein Shur, we talk with employers about how to appropriately accommodate their employees who are dealing with anxiety, depression, a lot of these mental health issues that have popped up with COVID. So definitely not something you need to stress about, but certainly something you should be aware of to minimize risk to your business. That's
interesting, Talesha. So if an employee says to their HR person or their manager, I need to be out for a few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, just because of this, and this under the family medical leave, they can be out, but they're not going to be paid. They don't. The employer can choose to be. Can the employer choose to pay the employee during that time, or how does that work?
Certainly. The employer can always choose to pay the employee, or you may have a policy that requires your employees to use sick time, vacation time, or PTO, something like that. But FMLA is a federal law, and it's unpaid, and so there's no obligation to pay your employee.
Talesha, great stuff. Thank you very much for the expertise. And if someone wants to contact you or the firm, Bernstein Shur Group, easiest way or best way, the main website, what would you recommend?
Yeah, contact us at our main website or give us a call at 623-8700. Jack, thank you for having me on this morning. I really appreciate it.
I'd like to get you back again in maybe a couple weeks. Thank you, Talesha.